Even when you feel low, you can still go. Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go. Go, 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 yo, go, go, go. Hustle hard, hustle every single day. I'll be making moves till I'm buried in my grave. To the system, I don't wanna be a slave. I've been doing shit my way, or the highway.
Hey, what's going on? Welcome back to the vlog. A little bit of B-roll there for you. I don't know, all the other vloggers are doing it, why not? Here on a Tuesday afternoon up at Orange City, looking to run it up. Gonna jump in the 1-2, see if they'll get the 1-3 game running. If you enjoy, please like, please subscribe. It always helps the channel. Let's get to it.
As I take my seat at the table looks pretty soft. It's mostly older guys. The large stack appears to be about $300. Now, I think it's important to try not to make things happen, but rather just play my game and let the action come to me. With all that being said, the table dynamic won't stay like this for long. In the first hand of the night, we're in the big blind. We look down at 7-8 offsuit. We see limps from the cutoff, the button, and the small blind. When the action gets to me, I bump it up to $10. The problem with a bet like this is that everybody ends up calling, so now we're playing a bloated pot out of position. The flop is 4-9 king, so I don't really connect very well here, but the action checks through, so we'll see a turn. The turn is a 5 of hearts, so it brings in a gut shot for me. The small blind leads on this card for $10. I decide to go ahead and continue on and make the call. Everybody else folds. We're off to a river heads up. The river is a blank that does not complete anything for me. Once again, the small blind leads for $15. It's a tiny bet, but I don't beat anything, so I fold. We're straddling from the button this time, and we look down at 8-9 offsuit. Action starts on the small blind. He actually min-clicks it to $10, though it sounded like he really just meant to call. It folds to the hijack who calls, and then folds to me, and I put the 3-bet in for $25. I'm keeping it small because of my impression of the table being so soft. The small blind makes a splashy call, and the hijack comes along as well. We're off to a flop 3 ways. The flop is queen 4-7 with 2 clubs, so once again, I don't really connect here. The small blind checks, then the hijack leads out for $20. I do have a backdoor straight draw, and I have position, so I decide to go ahead and make the call. The small blind folds, we're off to the turn heads up. The turn is a 9 of clubs, so it brings the front door flush in, though it does give me second pair. My opponent bets out for $25, and despite picking up some equity, all of my cards are red. It's a tiny bet, and I'm getting like 6-1 to call, but given this table dynamic, I just don't ever see this guy making a bet like this with anything less than top pair, so I decide to let it go. He was nice enough to show me he had the queen of spades, so I was behind. The very next hand, we're in the cutoff, and we look down at 7-8 offsuit. It folds all the way around to me, and given that there's been no action, I decided to go ahead and just limp this hand, as I'm worried a raise is just going to take it down, and I'll end up losing $1 on the rake. The small blind makes the call, and then the big blind does the raising for me. He bumps it up to $7. I have position, so I elect to just call again, as does the small blind, so we're off to a flop 3 ways. The flop is 7-8 king, so I flop bottom 2 pair here. It checks to me and I fire for $10. I'm looking to get value from any king or maybe a non-believing 7 or 8, though I do kind of block hands with those cards in them. The small blind makes the call, but the big blind folds, so we're off to a turn heads up. The turn is a jack, so it's starting to connect this board a little bit more here. My opponent checks to me and I fire again, this time for $25, looking to charge any possible draws or any weaker hands, but my opponent folds. We're in the big blind this time and we look down at pocket jacks. We see a call from under the gun before it folds to the button, who bumps it up to $8. It folds to me, and I put the 3-bet in to $22. The button is the only caller, so we're off to a flop out of position heads up. The flop is king 6-6 with 2 diamonds. I'm not going to let that king scare me. I'm the 3-better, so I'm going to fire here, and I do for $40, and my opponent folds. So that's kind of been the action for the first 45 minutes. No huge pots, players only calling small bets, etc. Then a 2-5 player sits down, and that's going to be the theme for the day. A constant rotation of 2-5 players waiting to get a seat, so they sit with us for 10 minutes and then get called to their game. At Orange City, 2-5 players are notorious for sitting at 1-2 and playing ultra aggressive, and then getting mad when you actually have a hand or make a hero call. This logic is going to play into my decision making in this next hand. We are under the gun and we look down at pocket 4s. I limp and it folds to the 2-5 player, who bumps it up to $8. We see one caller and I make the call as well, so we're off to a flop 3 ways. The flop is 7-7 king rainbow. It checks to the 2-5 player, who bets $12. I decide to go ahead and stick around, and I'm the only caller. We're off to a turn heads up. The turn is a 5 of hearts, and now it brings in a backdoor heart draw. Once again, I check it to my opponent, and this time he fires for 30. I'm still not convinced. This is his very first hand, and I think he's here to push people around, so I decide to go ahead and make the call. We're off to the river. The river is a 6 of clubs, so no obvious draws hit, except maybe 8-9, which I don't think he would have bet flop with. I check, and my opponent shoves for 150. It's back on me, and I enter the tank. I just can't see many 7s in his pre-flop raising range unless it's 6-7 or 7-8 maybe. He could have a king, but he could also have a hand like ace-queen, ace-jack suited, or maybe 8-9 or 9-10, which is firing, looking for a better pair to fold. If I'm right here, I'm a hero. If I'm wrong, I'm an idiot. I eventually talk myself into a call, and his hand might actually surprise you. He flips over 7-5 for a turned full house. I knew it was the nuts or air, and if I had been right, this would have been a huge pot for me, but this one's gonna go to him. I step away for a few minutes, and when I return, he and all of my chips are gone over at the 2-5 table. We're four-handed now, we're on the button, and we look down at Jack Queen of clubs. The under the gun / cutoff player makes the call, and with the action on me, I bump it up to $10. Both blinds get out of the way, but the cutoff calls, so we're off to a flop heads up. The flop is 8-9-4 rainbow, so I flopped a gut shot straight draw and a backdoor flush draw. My opponent checks it to me, and I fire for $15, and he calls, so we'll see a turn. The turn is a 10 of clubs, so I've turned my straight, and now I have a gut shot straight flush draw. Once again, my opponent checks, and I decide to go ahead and check behind for a little bit of deception and to try to keep some worse hands in. The river is a 5 of hearts, it's a pretty safe card. Once again, my opponent checks, and I've got a fire now, so I bet $40. I'm giving my opponent a little better than 2-1 to call me off a little light. My opponent rolls over an 8, but then he folds. We're on the button this time, and we look down at pocket aces. We see a call from the cutoff before I bump it up to $10, the small blind and the cutoff call, so we're off to a flop 3 ways. The flop is ace-queen-4 rainbow, so I flop top set here. The action checks to me, and having this board so locked up, I decide to go ahead and just check behind. The turn is an 8 of diamonds, so it brings a diamond draw on, and the small blind leads on this card for $20. Then we see a call from the cutoff. The action's on me, and I consider a flat for a little bit of deception, but I'm not gonna like mini diamond river, so I decide to go ahead and raise, and I'm bumping up to $65. Unfortunately, they both make the fold. We're straddling from the button once again, and we look down at 6-8 offsuit. We see 2 callers, and so I check the action. We're off to a flop 3 ways. The flop is 9 deuce queen with 2 hearts, so nothing but some backdoor draws for me, but the action will check through, so we'll see a turn. The turn is a 7 of diamonds, so now I'm open-ended. It checks to the cutoff who fires for $7. Now that I'm open-ended, I don't want to call and end up bricking out, so instead I'm going to raise and apply some pressure, and so I bump it up to $21. Both players end up folding. I'm showcasing this hand because this has been the last hour or so, just short-handed passive play with intermittent 2-5 players bouncing in and out. Finally, our table gets 4-handed and we break it. I'm lucky enough to get another good angle at my new table. I have no idea how the table is, but at least it's full. We sit at this new table with $205. There's a button straddle, we're in the cutoff, and we look down at ace-queen offsuit. There are 4 callers to the pre-flop action, so when the action gets to me, I put in the raise to $35. Unfortunately, everyone folds, but I scoop $22 not having to see a flop. Little hands like that will add up throughout the course of a session. Across the table in seat 7 is a guy who plays a ton of pots, and he raises with all sorts of hands. I think I can get paid off by this guy, and so I'm going to play with him as much as I can. We're in the big blind when we look down at pocket 10s. It folds to the action cutoff who bumps it up to $10. Then the button raises to $25. There's a little confusion on if he said call or quarter, but it was in fact a raise. I think I should be 4-betting here all the time, but I actually end up just calling. The cutoff also calls, so we're off to a flop 3 ways. The flop is deuce 4-7 rainbow, pretty good flop here for 10s. I decide to go ahead and lead out for $60. Now looking back, it's totally the wrong move. I'm betting into the cutoff who opened with a raise and the button who 3-bet. I should probably be checking here to keep all of their bluffs in and allow them to take a stab, but I didn't, and they both fold. Definitely didn't play this one right. We're straddling from the button and we look down at 7-9 of hearts. There are 5 callers when the action gets to me, and this is normally a spot where I check, but I'm going to try raising these suited gappers a little bit more, and I bump it up to $30. We see calls from the small blind and the low jack, so we'll play this flop 3-handed. The flop is King 3-6 Rainbow. It checks to the low jack who bets $30. I have some backdoor draws, and I'm getting like 4.5 to 1, so I actually end up peeling off and calling here. This brings along the small blind, so we're still off to a turn 3 ways. The turn is a 2 of diamonds, so the hand's just getting worse for me. Now the small blind leads for $70. The cutoff folds, and unfortunately I have to fold here as well. About 45 minutes goes by before I'm under the gun and I look down at ace-king offsuit. I open the action for $12. We see a call from the hijack and the button, so we're off to a flop out of position 3 ways. The flop is 6-9 deuce with 2 hearts. I am holding the ace of hearts, so I've got a blocker to the nut flush. I think a c-bet here is fine, but I elect to just check, and the action actually checks all the way through. The turn is an 8 of clubs, so it's connecting the board a little bit more, and it checks to the hijack who bets $10. The button folds, but I decide to go ahead and call. We're off to the river. The river is an ace of clubs, so it gives me top pair, but it brings in the backdoor flush. When my opponent bet turn, I was worried about the club, so I elect to just check it over to him, and he snap checks it right back. I show and I'm good here. I probably could have bet river, but again, I was worried about the clubs.
I think you had me until then.
We're in the low jack and we look down at 8-9 of spades. We see a call from under the gun before +1 bumps it up to $5. +2 makes the call, and when the action gets to me, I 3-bet to $20. +1 and +2 call, so we're off to a flop 3 ways. The flop is King Queen 7, so once again I haven't really connected. The action checks to me, and I'm not going to win this hand at showdown by checking, so I bet $45, and both opponents fold. Take this one down with 9 high. The very next hand we're in the hijack, and we look down once again at pocket jacks. There's an early position raise to $5. It folds to me, and I re-raise to $20. We see calls from the cutoff and the early position raiser, so we're off to a flop 3 ways. The flop is Queen 5-6 with 2 diamonds. It checks to me, and I continue for $55. Can't always be afraid of the overcards. The cutoff calls, and then the early position raiser jams all in for $195 effective. Back on me, and where are we at? There's already about $380 in the pot, and I have $145 behind, so I'm getting slightly better than 2.5 to 1 on my money. So why is he raising so much? Could be a set, could be a hand like ace-king or ace-queen, but he could also do this with a hand like 9s or 10s for protection, or perhaps even a diamond draw. I feel like I'm either in a world of hurt, or I'm probably ahead here. After tanking forever, I decide to go ahead and call. If I lose, I have food ready at the bar, and I can eat, and then I can just go home. The cutoff folds, so we'll see a run out.
It's a big turn card.
Shit. I can't believe it.
My opponent is not happy. He flashes a queen, and he mucks his hand, and we scoop a $500 pot.
I know, man, but I mean, I'm getting what feels like almost 3 to 1 on my money.
With food ready, I decided to go ahead and take a break, and this is where I'm going to take a break from the episode. I'll have part 2 of this episode out in a couple days here. Take a little preview as to how this session turns out. I have top pair, and there are a lot of draws that can be playing their hand the exact same way as a bluff, so I call this one off. We'll see a run out. There's a button straddle, we're under the gun, and once again, we look down at pocket jacks. I'm going to need some help on this one. I'm going to borrow a page out of Brad Owen's book. How about smashing that like button on the count of 3? 1, 2, 3. Watch how fast this all goes down.
I call.
I love my hand. I just have no idea what I'm up against. You do not want to miss part 2 of this episode. Look for it here in the next couple days. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel for more poker content. And you can follow me on Instagram at 7cardflushpoker.